The stars themselves seemed tired of war. Captain Jake Morrison stared through the viewport of the USS Defiance at the twisted wreckage floating in space. Metal and crystal debris drifted like deadly snow, the remains of battles fought long before humans ever looked up at the night sky. "How long has this been going on?" asked Dr. Lisa Carter, the ship's science officer. She pressed her hand against the cold glass, watching chunks of alien technology tumble past their small exploration vessel. "According to our records, about 900,000 years," Morrison replied quietly. "Maybe longer. Nobody really knows when it started anymore. The war had no beginning that anyone could remember. Two ancient alien races had been fighting for so long that the conflict had become part of the galaxy's natural order. Like gravity or the speed of light, the war between the Zephyrians and the Karathi was simply a fact of existence. Morrison had read the reports during their journey to this sector. The Zephyrians were beings made of living crystal who could control electricity and magnetism. Their ships looked like floating jewels, beautiful and deadly. They believed that only the strongest deserved to survive, and they proved their strength by bending the very forces of nature to their will. The Karathi were different, but equally terrifying. They were insect-like creatures that shared a single mind across their entire species. Their ships were grown from living tissue, constantly healing and changing. They wanted to absorb every other thinking being in the galaxy into their collective consciousness. For nearly 1,000,000 years, these two civilizations had fought each other across half the galaxy. Entire star systems had been turned into battlefields. Planets had been cracked open like eggs. Suns had been drained of their energy to power massive weapons. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," announced Lieutenant Commander Steve Walsh from his position at the communications console. "It's on an old frequency, something from the Galactic Archives." Morrison frowned. The USS Defiance was supposed to be conducting a routine survey mission in empty space. There should not be anyone out here to send them messages. "Put it through," he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing a grainy image of an alien being Morrison did not recognize. The creature had blue-gray skin and large dark eyes that seemed filled with desperation. "This is Ambassador Keltar of the Galactic Neutral Zone Authority," the alien said. His voice was translated by the ship's computer, but the fear came through clearly. "If any vessel receives this message, please respond. We need help immediately." Morrison looked around at his crew. Commander Paul Rogers, his second-in-command, shrugged. "Never heard of any Galactic Neutral Zone Authority," Rogers said. "Neither have I," Morrison admitted. "But they sound like they're in trouble." The message continued. "The war between the Zephyrians and the Karathi has reached a critical point. Both sides have developed weapons that can destroy entire star systems. If they use these weapons, the destruction will spread across the galaxy like a fire. Billions of innocent beings will die." Dr. Carter moved to her science station and began running searches through the ship's database. "I'm not finding any records of this Ambassador Keltar or his organization," she reported. "But the transmission is definitely genuine. It's coming from coordinates about 6 hours away at maximum speed." Morrison made his decision quickly. It was the kind of choice that had made him a good exploration captain. When faced with the unknown, he always chose to investigate rather than run away. "Change course," he ordered. "Take us to those coordinates." The USS Defiance was not a large ship by human standards. It carried a crew of 847 people, and it was designed for exploring unknown regions of space rather than fighting wars. Compared to the massive alien warships that dominated this part of the galaxy, it was barely larger than a speck of dust. As they traveled toward the transmission source, Morrison gathered his senior staff in the briefing room. The holographic display showed what little information they had about the ongoing war. "The conflict covers roughly 40% of the galaxy," Dr. Carter explained, pointing to vast red areas on the star map. "These regions are completely controlled by either the Zephyrians or the Karathi. No other species dares to enter them." Chief Engineer Nancy Phillips studied the technical data they had collected from the debris field. "The level of technology these aliens possess is incredible," she said. "Some of their weapons operate on principles we don't even understand yet." "Then what are we supposed to do about it?" asked Rogers. "If 17 other advanced civilizations have tried to stop this war and failed, what chance do we have?" Morrison did not have an answer to that question. Humanity had only been traveling between the stars for less than 200 years. They were newcomers to the galaxy, still learning about the vast civilizations that had existed for millions of years before Earth's first humans learned to make fire. But something about the ambassador's message bothered him. The alien had sounded genuinely terrified, not just of the war itself, but of something specific that was about to happen. "Computer, replay the transmission," Morrison ordered. They watched the message again, paying closer attention to the ambassador's exact words. When he mentioned the galaxy-destroying weapons, his fear seemed to intensify. He said both sides have these weapons. Morrison realized, not that they're building them, but that they already have them finished. Dr. Carter checked her calculations. If weapons capable of destroying star systems were used in a war of this scale, the chain reaction could theoretically spread across most of the galaxy, she confirmed. The energy release from one exploding star could trigger explosions in nearby systems. The briefing room fell silent as the crew absorbed this information. They were not just talking about the end of the war anymore. They were talking about the end of everything. Morrison looked around at his officers. These were good people who had signed up to explore the unknown and make contact with new civilizations. None of them had expected to find themselves in the middle of a crisis that could destroy the entire galaxy. "Sir, we're approaching the coordinates," announced Walsh over the intercom. Morrison stood up. "All right, people. I don't know what we're going to find out there, but we're going to do whatever we can to help. That's what humans do." As the USS Defiance dropped out of hyperspace, Morrison hoped that whatever they found would give them some idea of how to prevent the destruction of everything they had ever known. The galaxy was counting on them, even though it did not know they existed. The space station appeared out of nowhere, hidden inside what looked like a natural nebula. As the USS Defiance drew closer, Morrison realized the colorful gas clouds were actually artificial, designed to hide the massive structure within. "That thing is enormous," whispered Dr. Carter, staring at the readings on her screen. "It's at least 50 kilometers long." The station looked like it had been built by combining technology from dozens of different species. Sections of crystalline architecture sat next to organic-looking biometal structures. Parts of it appeared to be made from materials Morrison had never seen before. "This is Ambassador Keltar," came a voice over the communications system. "Welcome to Station Omega 7, Captain Morrison. Please dock at Bay 14. We have much to discuss and very little time." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. He had never told the ambassador his name. The docking process took nearly an hour. The station's technology was so advanced that the USS Defiance's computers had trouble interfacing with the docking systems. Finally, Chief Engineer Phillips managed to establish a connection, and their small ship was gently pulled into one of the station's many docking bays. Morrison left Commander Rogers in charge of the ship and took a small team with him to meet the ambassador. Dr. Carter and Lieutenant Walsh accompanied him through corridors that seemed to shift and change as they walked. Ambassador Keltar was waiting for them in a large meeting room. Up close, Morrison could see that the alien was very old. His blue-gray skin was marked with lines and scars, and his large eyes held the weight of centuries. "Captain Morrison," the ambassador said, rising from his chair, "thank you for coming. I know this must be confusing for you." "You could say that," Morrison replied. "We've never heard of your organization, and according to our records, this entire sector of space is supposed to be empty." Keltar gestured for them to sit at a conference table made from some kind of translucent material. "The Galactic Neutral Zone Authority has existed for over 200,000 years, he explained. "We are made up of species that have managed to avoid being consumed by the war between the Zephyrians and the Karathi." Dr. Carter leaned forward. "How many species are part of your organization?" 43 at last count, Keltar answered sadly. "There used to be more, but the war has a way of spreading. Entire civilizations have been forced to choose sides or face extinction." The ambassador activated a holographic display that showed the current state of the galaxy. Morrison was shocked to see how much territory the two warring species controlled. Vast regions of space were colored either blue for the Zephyrians or red for the Karathi. "The situation has become critical," Keltar continued. "Our intelligence networks have confirmed that both sides have completed work on weapons of unimaginable destructive power. They call them star killers." Lieutenant Walsh studied the technical specifications that appeared on the display. "These weapons can actually destroy entire solar systems?" "Not just destroy them," Keltar said grimly. "They can turn them into expanding waves of energy that will consume everything in their path. Our scientists believe that if even one of these weapons is used, it could trigger a chain reaction that spreads across half the galaxy. Morrison felt his heart sink. When are they planning to use these weapons? Intelligence suggests within 72 hours, the ambassador replied. Both sides are positioning their fleets for what they believe will be the final battle. Rather than accept defeat, one or both civilizations will likely deploy their star killers. Dr. Carter was running calculations on her portable computer. The energy release from destroying just one star system would be enormous, she said. If it triggered explosions in nearby systems, the effect could snowball across thousands of light years. Exactly, Keltar confirmed. This is why we sent out the distress call. We need someone to intervene before it's too late. Morrison looked around the room, taking in the desperate faces of the various alien beings present. Ambassador, with all due respect, humanity has only been spacefaring for about 2 centuries. We're barely more advanced than the species these two civilizations conquered 50,000 years ago. What could we possibly do that 43 advanced civilizations cannot? Keltar's expression became even more serious. Captain, 17 different species have attempted to mediate this conflict over the past 300,000 years. The Thylorians sent their greatest diplomats. The Zentari deployed their most powerful warships. The Corvani offered technological solutions that should have ended the fighting. What happened to all of them? Asked Walsh. They all failed, the ambassador said simply. The Zephyrians and Karathi have evolved beyond reasoning. War is not just what they do anymore. War is what they are. They have rejected every attempt at peace, every offer of compromise, every show of superior force. Morrison stood up and walked to the viewing window that showed the nebula outside the station. So why call us? What makes you think humans can succeed where everyone else has failed? Because you are different, Keltar said. Every other species that attempted to stop the war did so using the same basic approaches. They tried to outthink the combatants, overpower them, or convince them with superior wisdom and technology. Dr. Carter looked up from her computer, and that didn't work, because both sides have had hundreds of thousands of years to develop countermeasures for those approaches. Precisely, the ambassador confirmed. But humans are new to the galaxy. You have no preconceived notions about how these things should be done. Your species has a reputation for finding unexpected solutions to impossible problems. Morrison turned back to face the group. What kind of reputation? We've barely made contact with anyone out here. Keltar smiled for the first time since they had arrived. Captain, your species fought a global war using primitive chemical weapons, then went on to split the atom and reach your moon within the same century. You built machines that could think, cured diseases that had plagued you for millennia, and learned to manipulate genetic code, all in the span of a few hundred years. Other species take thousands of years to make those same advances. Added another alien being Morrison had not noticed before. Humans have a unique ability to adapt and innovate rapidly. Morrison felt the weight of expectation settling on his shoulders. The idea that his small crew might be able to end a war that had lasted nearly 1,000,000 years seemed impossible. But looking around at the desperate faces in the room, he realized they might be the galaxy's only hope. What kind of resources can you provide us with? He asked. Keltar's eyes brightened. Whatever you need, Captain. Technical specifications on both alien technologies, star charts showing fleet positions, communication codes, anything that might help. Dr. Carter was already thinking ahead. We'll need detailed information about their weapon systems, power sources, and command structures. And their tactical patterns, added Walsh. If they've been fighting for this long, they must have developed predictable strategies. Morrison made his decision. All right, Ambassador. We'll try to help. I can't promise we'll succeed, but we'll give it everything we have. The relief on Keltar's face was obvious. Thank you, Captain. The entire galaxy is in your debt. As they prepared to return to the USS Defiance, Morrison wondered what he had just committed his crew to. They were about to attempt something that the greatest civilizations in the galaxy had failed to achieve. But maybe that was exactly what made them the right choice for the job. Back aboard the USS Defiance, Morrison called an emergency meeting of all senior staff. The briefing room filled quickly as word spread through the ship that they were facing something far more serious than a routine exploration mission. I want everyone to understand what we're dealing with, Morrison began, activating the holographic display that showed the data Ambassador Keltar had provided. This is not just about stopping a war. If we fail, there might not be a galaxy left to save. Dr. Carter presented her analysis of the star killer weapons. These devices work by destabilizing the nuclear fusion process inside a star, she explained. Once triggered, the star explodes with approximately 10,000 times its normal energy output. The explosion creates a wave of charged particles that can trigger similar reactions in nearby star systems. Chief Engineer Phillips studied the technical specifications with growing amazement. "The level of energy control required for something like this is incredible," she said. "Both species must have technology that's millions of years ahead of ours." Commander Rogers raised the question everyone was thinking. If their technology is that advanced, how are we supposed to stop them? Our weapons couldn't scratch the paint on one of their smaller ships. Morrison had been thinking about the same problem. "Maybe that's exactly why we can succeed," he said. "Everyone who's tried to stop this war has approached it as a military problem. They tried to force the combatants to surrender using superior firepower or technology." Lieutenant Walsh pulled up the tactical analysis he had been working on. "I've been studying their battle patterns for the past 6 hours," he reported. "Both sides fight according to very predictable strategies. After 900,000 years, they've developed responses to almost every possible military tactic." "What do you mean by predictable?" asked Morrison. Walsh highlighted different sections of the battle data. "Look at this pattern. The Zephyrians always begin major engagements by trying to disable enemy command ships using electromagnetic attacks. The Karathi respond by deploying bioships that can resist electromagnetic damage. Then the Zephyrians switch to kinetic weapons and the Karathi adapt their hull composition." Dr. Carter studied the data more closely. "It's like they're playing an incredibly complex game that they've both memorized perfectly. Each side knows exactly how the other will respond to any given move." "That's not the strangest part," Walsh continued. "Look at the timing. Major battles happen on a regular schedule. Both fleets withdraw to recharge their weapon systems, then meet again at predetermined locations." Phillips made a connection. "Their power system," she said suddenly. "I've been analyzing their energy signatures. Both species use massive fusion reactors that take months to fully charge between major battles." Morrison began to see the pattern. "So they're not really trying to win anymore. They're just going through the motions of a war that has become ritualized." "Exactly," Walsh confirmed. "Neither side can maintain high-intensity combat for more than a few days at a time. That's why the war has lasted so long. They fight, exhaust their power supplies, retreat, recharge, and fight again." Dr. Carter was running new calculations on her computer. "If both sides are dependent on these charging cycles, that might be our way in. Instead of trying to defeat them militarily, we could disrupt their ability to continue fighting." The room fell silent as everyone considered this possibility. Morrison could see the wheels turning in his officers' minds. "What kind of disruption are you thinking about?" asked Rogers. "Electromagnetic pulse," Phillips said immediately. "If we could generate a powerful enough EMP field, we might be able to overload their charging systems." Walsh shook his head. "The amount of power required would be enormous. Our ship's reactors couldn't generate anything close to what we'd need." "What if we modified the reactors?" Phillips asked. "Stripped out everything non-essential and redirected all power to the EMP generators?" Morrison felt a spark of excitement. "Could that work?" Phillips was already running calculations. "It would be dangerous. We'd be pushing the reactors far beyond their design limits. If something went wrong, the ship could be destroyed. But if it worked," Morrison pressed, "if it worked, we could generate an electromagnetic pulse powerful enough to disrupt every charging system within a 50,000-kilometer radius," Phillips confirmed. Dr. Carter looked up from her computer. "According to the fleet positions Ambassador Keltar provided, both alien fleets will be within 30,000 kilometers of each other when they meet for the final battle. So we could hit both fleets simultaneously," Morrison realized. Rogers still looked skeptical. "Even if we could disrupt their charging systems, wouldn't they just repair them and continue fighting?" Walsh had been studying the technical specifications more carefully. "Not necessarily," he said. "These charging systems are incredibly complex. If we could cause a complete overload, it might take years to rebuild them. And without their charging systems, they couldn't power their star-killer weapons," Dr. Carter added. Morrison stood up and began pacing around the room. The plan was starting to take shape in his mind. So instead of trying to destroy their fleets or force them to surrender, we make it impossible for them to continue fighting. It's never been tried before, Phillips warned. No one has ever targeted the support systems instead of the actual warships. That's exactly why it might work, Morrison said. They've spent hundreds of thousands of years preparing for every possible military attack. But they've never had to defend against someone trying to disable their infrastructure. Dr. Carter was getting excited about the possibilities. If we time it right, we could catch both fleets just as they're preparing to deploy their star killers. Without power, those weapons would be useless. Morrison made his decision. Phillips, how long would you need to make the modifications to our reactors? The chief engineer considered the question carefully. Working around the clock with all available personnel, maybe 18 hours. But Captain, I have to stress how dangerous this will be. We'll be operating the reactors at 400% of their normal capacity. What are the odds the ship will survive the process? Asked Rogers. Phillips was quiet for a long moment. Maybe 50-50, she admitted finally. Morrison looked around at his crew. These were good people who had signed up for exploration, not suicide missions. He could not order them to take this kind of risk. I want everyone to understand what we're proposing, he said. We're going to fly directly between two massive alien fleets and try to disable both of them, using untested modifications to our ship's power system. There's a good chance we won't survive. The room was silent for several seconds. Then Walsh spoke up. Captain, if we don't try this, the entire galaxy might be destroyed anyway. At least this way we have a chance to make a difference, added Dr. Carter. Phillips nodded. I'd rather take a 50-50 chance of saving the galaxy than a 0% chance of surviving its destruction. One by one, every officer in the room voiced their agreement. Morrison felt a surge of pride in his crew. When faced with impossible odds, they had chosen to fight rather than run. All right then, Morrison said. Phillips, start those modifications immediately. Carter, I want you to calculate the exact timing and positioning we'll need. Walsh, prepare tactical scenarios for every possible response from the alien fleets. As his crew scattered to begin their preparations, Morrison remained in the briefing room, staring at the holographic display showing the approaching alien fleets. In less than 2 days, they would either save the galaxy or die trying. For the first time since receiving Ambassador Keltar's message, Morrison allowed himself to believe they might actually succeed. The USS Defiance dropped out of hyperspace exactly where Dr. Carter had calculated, positioned directly between the two largest military fleets in galactic history. Morrison felt his breath catch in his throat as he saw the alien armadas spread out before them. The Zephyrian fleet stretched across space like a field of deadly stars. Over 3,000 ships of various sizes floated in perfect formation, their crystalline hulls catching and reflecting the light from nearby suns. The smallest vessels were the size of Earth's largest skyscrapers, while the command ships were so massive they had their own gravitational fields. Facing them across 50,000 kilometers of empty space, the Karathi biofleet writhed like a living creature. Their 2,800 vessels pulsed with internal light, organic curves suggesting both beauty and predatory hunger. As Morrison watched, he could see some of the ships actually growing new weapon pods, their living hulls reshaping themselves for battle. Both fleets have detected us, reported Lieutenant Walsh from his tactical station. We're receiving multiple scanning beams from both sides. Morrison could understand their confusion. The USS Defiance was so small compared to the alien dreadnoughts that many sensors probably classified it as space debris at first. Their little exploration ship was like a rowboat floating between two aircraft carrier battle groups. Power levels on the modifications? Morrison asked. Chief Engineer Phillips checked her readings. All systems are running at 300% capacity and holding steady. We can push to 400% when you give the order, but I can't guarantee how long the reactors will hold. Dr. Carter monitored the alien fleet positions from her science station. Both sides are moving into their final attack formations. Based on the energy signatures I'm detecting, they'll be ready to deploy their Starkiller weapons in approximately 1 hour. Morrison opened communication channels to both fleets simultaneously. The main view screen split to show the commanders of each armada. On the left appeared High Commander Vexithala of the Zephyrians, a being of living crystal whose body seemed to contain miniature lightning storms. On the right, the image flickered as the Karathi overmind Segthak manifested itself through one of its bioships, appearing as a mass of writhing tentacles around multiple glowing eyes. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel USS Defiance," he announced calmly. "This war ends now." The response was immediate and predictable. Both alien commanders began speaking at once, their translated voices overlapping in Morrison's earpiece. "Unknown vessel, you will withdraw immediately or be destroyed," commanded Vexathala, electricity crackling around her crystalline form. "Small craft, you do not comprehend the forces at work here," hissed the overmind through its bioship interface. "Retreat before you are consumed." Morrison had expected this reaction. "I understand the forces perfectly," he replied. "You're both about to deploy weapons that will destroy half the galaxy. I'm here to stop that from happening." Vexthala's form brightened with anger. "The Karathi plague must be eliminated from the universe. We will not allow interference from primitive species. The crystal beings will be absorbed into our collective consciousness," responded Segthak. "Your objection is irrelevant." Both commanders simultaneously gave orders to target the USS Defiance. Morrison watched as hundreds of weapon systems across both fleets began locking onto his ship. "This is exactly what we wanted," Morrison said to his crew. "They're so focused on us that they're not paying attention to what we're really doing." Walsh monitored the targeting systems. "First wave of weapons fire incoming. Impact in 30 seconds. Morrison turned to Phillips. "Chief, take us to maximum power." "Aye, sir." "Pushing reactors to 400% capacity." Alarms began blaring throughout the ship as the power levels climbed far beyond safe parameters. Smoke started drifting from overloaded circuits, and the lights flickered as massive amounts of energy were redirected to the modified electromagnetic pulse generators. 20 seconds to impact, Walsh reported. Morrison could see the energy beams and projectiles racing toward them from both alien fleets. Weapons that could vaporize planets were converging on their tiny ship. "Dr. Carter, initiate the pulse," Morrison ordered. Carter's hands flew over her control panel. Electromagnetic pulse generator online. Broadcasting on the calculated frequency in 3, 2, 1 now. The USS Defiance did not return fire or attempt to dodge the incoming weapons. Instead, it began broadcasting a carefully calibrated electromagnetic pulse that Dr. Carter's team had discovered was shared by both alien technologies. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the alien fleets. Every ship in both armadas began experiencing cascade power failures. The weapons targeting the USS Defiance shut down just seconds before impact. Emergency lights flickered on across thousands of vessels as their main power systems went offline. Morrison watched in amazement as the two most powerful military forces in the galaxy drifted helplessly in space. Ships that had been preparing to unleash destruction capable of igniting star systems were now floating dead in the void. "Pulse is holding steady," reported Carter. "Both fleets are experiencing complete power grid failures." Phillips monitored their own systems with growing concern. "Captain, we're pushing way beyond safe limits. I'm reading stress fractures in the reactor containment units." "How long can we maintain this?" Morrison asked. "Maybe an hour if we're lucky," Phillips replied. "But sir, I'm not sure the ship will survive much longer than that." Morrison made the calculation in his head. They needed to maintain the pulse long enough to ensure that both fleets' charging systems were permanently disabled. According to their analysis, that would take at least 45 minutes. "We hold the pulse," he decided. "No matter what happens to us, we have to make sure those Starkiller weapons can never be used." Across both alien fleets, confusion reigned. Ship commanders who had been preparing for the ultimate battle found themselves completely powerless. Emergency communication channels crackled with reports of system failures. High Commander Vexathala's image reappeared on the view screen, transmitted from backup power systems. "What have you done to our fleets?" she demanded. The overmind Segthak also managed to restore communications. "Our bioships are going into emergency hibernation." "How is this possible?" Morrison kept his voice calm and steady. "Your charging systems are being permanently disabled. The Starkiller weapons will never function again. You have a choice now. You can spend the next 50 years rebuilding your weapons to continue this war, or you can spend that time building something better." Both alien commanders began shouting threats and demands, but Morrison noticed something interesting in their voices. For the first time in hundreds of thousands of years, they sounded uncertain. 30 minutes elapsed, reported Carter. Both fleets' charging systems are showing signs of irreversible damage. Phillips was fighting to keep their reactors stable. Captain, we're losing containment in Reactor 2. I need to shut it down or we'll have a cascade failure. Can we maintain the pulse with the remaining reactors? Morrison asked. For maybe 15 more minutes, Phillips replied. Morrison watched the power readings fluctuate wildly. Sparks flew from overloaded panels around the bridge and the air was getting thick with smoke. But the electromagnetic pulse held steady, continuing to drain power from both alien fleets. 40 minutes, announced Carter. The charging systems are completely dead. Even if they started rebuilding today, it would take decades to restore them. 50 minutes, Carter reported finally. Both fleets are completely disabled. All Starkiller weapons are permanently offline. Morrison felt a wave of relief wash over him. Phillips shut down the pulse generators. The chief engineer quickly began the shutdown sequence. Pulse generators offline. Emergency power only throughout the ship. The USS Defiance hung motionless in space, its systems barely functional after pushing far beyond their design limits. Half their equipment was burned out, and the ship would need months of repairs. But they had achieved the impossible. Both alien fleets drifted silently around them, their crews struggling to comprehend what had just happened. For the first time in 900,000 years, continuing the war was literally impossible. Morrison opened a final communication channel to both fleet commanders. High Commander Vexthala, Overmind Segthak, the galaxy is watching what you do next. You can choose to rebuild your weapons and resume this war, or you can choose to build peace. As the USS Defiance sent out an emergency beacon calling for Ambassador Keltar's assistance, Morrison reflected on what his crew had accomplished. A small human ship with 847 people had ended the longest war in galactic history. They had not done it through superior firepower or advanced technology. They had done it by seeing the problem differently and having the courage to try something that had never been attempted before. Ambassador Keltar arrived with the largest neutral fleet Morrison had ever seen. Ships from dozens of different species appeared around the disabled alien armadas, their crews working quickly to establish order in what had been a battlefield just hours before. The USS Defiance was barely holding together. Emergency power flickered throughout the ship, and Chief Engineer Phillips reported that most of their major systems would need complete replacement. But they were alive, and more importantly, the galaxy was safe. Captain Morrison, came Keltar's voice over the communication system. What you have accomplished today will be remembered for as long as civilizations exist in this galaxy. Morrison was exhausted, but he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Ambassador, we're going to need some help getting our ship operational again. Already arranged, Keltar replied. Our best engineers are standing by to assist with repairs. But first we need to deal with the situation here. Morrison looked out at the two alien fleets floating helplessly in space. Thousands of ships that had been preparing for the ultimate battle were now completely powerless. Their crews were trapped aboard vessels that could barely maintain life support. What's the status of both fleets? Morrison asked. Dr. Carter had been monitoring the alien ships with their remaining sensors. Both fleets are running on emergency power only. Their life support systems are functioning, but they have no propulsion and no weapons capability. More importantly, their Starkiller weapons were permanently disabled. The charging systems that had taken decades to build were now twisted metal and burned out crystals. Even if both civilizations immediately began rebuilding, it would take generations to restore their galaxy-destroying capabilities. High Commander Vexathala and Overmind Segthak appeared on the main view screen again. For the first time since Morrison had met them, neither alien commander was making threats or demands for surrender. Captain Morrison, Vexathala said slowly, our weapons are completely non-functional. Our ships cannot move under their own power. What do you intend to do with us? The Overmind Segthak spoke through its bioship interface. The collective mind is confused. We have not experienced powerlessness in 700,000 years. Morrison realized that both alien leaders were genuinely asking for guidance. After nearly 1,000,000 years of constant warfare, they literally did not know what to do in a situation that did not involve fighting. That's up to you, Morrison replied. Ambassador Keltar is here representing the neutral species of the galaxy. If you're willing to talk, he's prepared to help arrange negotiations. For several long minutes, both alien commanders remained silent. Morrison could imagine the discussions taking place aboard their disabled ships. Entire civilizations were being forced to reconsider their fundamental purpose in life. Finally, Vexithala spoke. The Zephyrian Empire will consider negotiations, but we will not accept defeat or submit to Karathi domination. The collective consciousness agrees to participate in discussions, added Segthak, but we will not abandon our mission to unify all thinking beings. Ambassador Keltar took over the negotiations from there. His organization had been preparing for this possibility for thousands of years, even though many had believed it would never happen. The negotiations will take place aboard Station Omega-7, Keltar announced. Both fleets will be towed to neutral space by our rescue vessels. Representatives from each side will meet to discuss terms for ending this conflict permanently. Morrison was surprised when both alien commanders agreed to the arrangement. He had expected more resistance, but he was beginning to understand that neither side really wanted to continue fighting anymore. The war had become a habit rather than a genuine desire for victory. Over the following days, as the USS Defiance underwent emergency repairs, Morrison found himself serving as an unofficial mediator in the peace talks. His approach was uniquely human, focusing on practical solutions rather than ancient grievances. The way I see it, Morrison explained to both delegations during one particularly difficult session, you've both spent so much time fighting that you've forgotten what you were originally fighting about. Vexthala's crystalline form flickered with indignation. The Karathi seek to destroy the individuality of all thinking beings. They must be stopped. The crystal entities hoard resources and territory that could benefit the collective consciousness, responded the Karathi representative. They are obstacles to universal unity. Morrison leaned back in his chair. So you're fighting about two completely different things. The Zephyrians want to preserve individual freedom, and the Karathi want to achieve universal cooperation. Those aren't necessarily contradictory goals. Dr. Carter, who had been participating in the technical discussions, supported Morrison's observation. According to our analysis, both civilizations could achieve their primary objectives without eliminating the other. The breakthrough came when Morrison suggested dividing the galaxy into regions, where each civilization could pursue its goals without interference. The Zephyrians could maintain their crystal empires based on individual achievement, while the Karathi could develop their collective consciousness in separate territories. But what about the contested regions? Asked Vexthala. Those become neutral zones, Morrison proposed, administered jointly by both your civilizations and the neutral species, places where different ways of life can coexist. It took 3 weeks of negotiations, but eventually, both sides agreed to what became known as the Galactic Peace Accords. The treaty established territorial boundaries, created joint administration zones, and most importantly, included provisions for redirecting military resources toward reconstruction and exploration. Chief Engineer Phillips found herself leading a technological exchange program. You know, Captain, she told Morrison as they toured a combined Zephyrian Karathi research facility, both species have incredible technology that could benefit everyone. The Zephyrians have mastered energy manipulation, and the Karathi have developed amazing biological engineering. Dr. Carter was equally excited about the scientific possibilities. Working together, they could solve problems that neither civilization could handle alone. Climate restoration, stellar engineering, even faster than light travel improvements. Lieutenant Walsh was appointed to help coordinate the massive logistical effort of converting military fleets into exploration and construction vessels. It's amazing how much resources these civilizations were putting into the war, he observed. Now that energy is going toward rebuilding worlds that were damaged in the fighting. Morrison watched the transformation with growing amazement. Within 6 months, former enemies were working side by side to repair the damage caused by centuries of warfare. Worlds that had been turned into battlefields were being restored to their original beauty. The USS Defiance completed its repairs and prepared to return to human space. Morrison stood on the bridge looking out at the bustling activity around Station Omega-7. Ships from dozens of species were coming and going, carrying supplies and personnel for the reconstruction efforts. Captain, said Commander Rogers, both the Zephyrian Empire and the Karathi Collective have extended formal invitations for humanity to join the new galactic community. Morrison smiled. I think we've earned our place out here. Ambassador Keltar appeared on the main view screen for a final farewell. Captain Morrison, your species has given the galaxy something it had lost hope of ever finding again. Peace. We just did what humans do, Morrison replied. We saw a problem that needed solving and found a way to fix it. As the USS Defiance prepared to depart, Morrison reflected on what his crew had accomplished. They had not just ended a war. They had proven that sometimes the most impossible problems have the simplest solutions, if you're willing to look at them from a completely different perspective. The galaxy was entering a new age, an age where the energy and resources that had been wasted on warfare for nearly 1,000,000 years would be used to explore, create, and build. And humanity, the newcomers who had ended the longest war in galactic history, had earned their place as equals among the stars. Dr. Carter looked up from her science station as they entered hyperspace. Captain, where do you think we should explore next? Morrison grinned. Wherever we haven't been before, Doctor. That's what humans do best. Behind them, the galaxy continued its work of healing. Former enemies shared technology and resources, working together to build something better than either could have achieved alone. And in the neutral zones, new civilizations were learning that cooperation could be more powerful than conquest. The war that had lasted 900,000 years was truly over. Ended not by superior force or ancient wisdom, but by the simple human belief that every problem has a solution if you're willing to try something new.